All right, Mr. Chairman, over to you.
All right. So I think we're going to start the meeting with a roll call. So we'll go around and each of us state our name and who we represent, and as a call to order here, and then we'll review the agenda items for today. So I am Mark Combs. I'm the Chief Technology Officer for the Agency of Digital Services, and I am a co-chair for this council. Josiah, please.
I'm not actually a council member, so you have to skip me.
Yeah, that's a good point. Thank you. Mr. Sussman.
Hi, I'm Phil Sussman. I'm the governor's representative to the AI Council. Over.
And Joe.
I'm Joe Neer. I'm at the University of Vermont, and I'm representing the ACLU.
Great. Mr. Curtis.
Christopher Curtis, Assistant Attorney General, State of Vermont.
Great. I think, let's see, Amanda.
Yep.
Yep.
Amanda Jones. I work at the Vermont Department of Health, Rep for Health.
And I think that's all we have in attendance today for the council members. So also for those that are attending from the public's perspective, there will be an opportunity for public input at the end. We'll ask that each person who does raise their hand to participate, limit their conversation to the topics at hand, and you'll have a 2-minute time limit. So with that, we are at order. And the agenda for this week's meeting, or this month's meeting rather, was the approval, general updates and approval for prior meeting minutes. I think we have 3 of those that we would need to seek motions of approval and vote on. And then we're going to discuss procurement guidance, an overview of the AI inventory, and then we will open for public comment. So the first set of minutes, we're going to go back a little bit of ways. So if you do not have access to these minutes, they are available on the ADS website. This is where they're posted after they're approved, but sorry. Do we want to bring up the meeting minutes for the
Yep, I can do that.
The 7th of January. So we have the 7th of January.
7th of March, back to the 10th. So
yeah.
You want me to start with the most recent one?
Yes, please.
Alrighty. So these are the minutes.
And question would be, do we have enough folks who are quorum today who are also in attendance? Because I don't believe you can vote on accepting minutes from a meeting that you weren't at.
We only need a simple majority of the members present here to approve the minutes. We don't need we don't need all the same people. That's what I'm getting at.
Okay. All right.
I move we accept the minutes.
And can I have a second?
I believe Joe or Mark, you could second.
A second.
And all those in favor of accepting the meeting minutes from March 7th?
Aye.
All right, thank you.
Aye.
Does I like bring up the next?
Yep. So this is our special meeting from February 3rd.
And let's see, call to order, public comment. Yep. Okay. Would anybody like to make the motion to accept these?
Motion to
I
accept.
don't want to be argumentative, but SUSMANN.
One extra S. Thank you. We will correct the minutes. So I suggest you make the motion
I make the motion with as amended.
Thank you.
I'll second.
All right, in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, we've got majority there.
Sorry about that, Phil. We'll get that sorted out. You may see the same error on this one because we used a template. So, yep.
Okay. Oh, golly. Sorry about that. Thinking there. No report. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Any motion to accept the meeting minutes from January 10th, and that will have us all caught up.
I move with my name corrected that we accept the minutes.
I second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, thank you. We have I myself, so we have a majority on that. So let's move on to the next agenda item.
I'm gonna screen share again.
Yes, sir.
Just talking about procurement guidance.
Yes.
All right, so this was one of the items that we discussed back in our January session that we wanted to dive into in more detail. It wasn't our January session, it was in our March session that we wanted to dive into in more detail. So I wanted to just take you all through a little bit about what we already have for procurement guidance that impacts AI, a few things that I've seen from other states that are relevant, how we're approaching some of our training, like just a bunch of stuff that's relevant. So I'm just going to take you through some stuff. As you have feedback, please holler and let me know, and then we can talk about how we turn this into formal procurement guidance as the council sees that there are gaps. So currently ADS has statutory authority over everything that is IT related, data related, like any of that is procured, flows through ADS and is ultimately signed by the secretary. And the recommendation group for the secretary is the procurement advisory team. And that is a body that Mark and I both sit on. Jake also participates in that. Michelle also participates in that. You've got a good slice of that team here. And that is a little bit different from how we evaluate pilots. If it's a pilot that doesn't result in a procurement, those are just evaluated by the AI director separately. And I'll come back to that in a minute. So many states don't have that centralized authority that has oversight over all IT procurements. And so a lot of the guidance I've seen from other states is really creating that unique to AI. But because we already have that structure in place, I should also say it doesn't also include folks from the AG's office. So because we have that structure in place, we can recycle a lot of the stuff that's already there, and AI specific guidance, I think, can be much narrower. So we have another common thing from my review of what other states do around AI is making sure that companies that we're working with can't use state data to train AI models, and AI models that are used can't be like improved and then resold using state data without express permission. And we have a few things in what we affectionately call attachment C that call that out. Highlighted two of them here, which is basically limitations on how they can use data. They can only use it ways that we explicitly allow in our contracts. So there's no sneaky use of data. We have had two or three, and Mark or others, if you can think of others, let me know. But we've had a couple where people wanted to use state data to train AI models. One was an HR contract, which we found a way for them to use de-identified data, I believe, and found a way for them to do it appropriately. One where they wanted to use Agency of Transportation data that could include images captured by like stoplight cameras, and we told them no. Those are the two that were the big ones. I think there have been a handful of other like little ones where people are like, oh, we'd like to use this data. And generally we say no, unless there's a really strong benefit to the state of saying yes. And then we do it in ways that kind of limit the exposure of state data or identifiable data. Mark. Maybe Mark, if you want to make it so that Michelle can speak too. Anything else you want to add here?
I was just going to say that I think that the first one that you highlight there, the folks that have asked us to use our data have stumbled onto that, and they've explicitly requested, in the cases that Josiah mentioned. So it's essentially deny by default, policy that we have at this point. So just wanted to make that clear.
Sure,
Michelle,
if you want to
please.
recognize Michelle,
Yep.
so that she can
Michelle.
participate in this.
Yep.
I'll just add that we do often see this in negotiations too, when they don't explicitly ask or tell us what they want it for, but they try to redline some of our terms in order to use it for other purposes. We've been trying to be very strict on that too, and always ask them what do they want it for, why do they need it, and usually end up just rejecting it as well.
So, 2 attorney general offices, I've gotten their terms from their states around AI. This was from Iowa. These were about a year old. They were circulated to me as draft. I don't know exactly where they're at today, but these were some other terms they had that I felt were a little different from anything that we had in the state today. So for consideration. So one is like, if you want to use AI, if it's like a help desk contract or something, and you want to do tier 0 triage using AI, you'd have to ask for permission for that first. We don't currently have a blanket like prohibition on doing that without advance notice. So that's something we consider. Commenting code that's generated by AI if it's like a technical deliverable. Avoiding discrimination. They had one that was, if you use a third-party AI tool, you have to tell us how you evaluated that tool and how you evaluated that vendor, which was interesting. The bottom one, human responsibility for AI output, we have in our code of ethics, and generally where we suspect there could be use of AI in a contract, we've been adding a non-functional requirement that says you'll comply with our code of ethics, which covers that last one, but there might be an opportunity to fold that in. And then the human-operated alternatives for fail-safe mechanisms I haven't seen that in real life yet, but that's probably something that we should consider. So I have like actual for reals language on these from Iowa, but they are almost this broad. But if those are topics that we want to consider, we can. I'm gonna come back to that in a little bit. I'm gonna take you through how we look at whether a use is appropriate, because there's constraints on whether you use AI or not, and then there's like looking at how or whether this is an appropriate place to plug AI in. So these are some things from our training materials, and also from what I provide to supervisors as they're evaluating kind of employee productivity use. So diminishing trust, I use the VT Digger test. I told VT Digger about this already, so this will not be a surprise to them if they watch the recording. But basically, is this something that would be an interesting story for VT Digger, and what flavor of interesting story would it be? And that usually helps supervisors to have a pretty good sense of, is this an appropriate place to use AI, or is this maybe not? And then upstream and downstream review processes. We've talked about this in our data use and management policy, and then just general alignment with the code of ethics and relevant agency policies. I take them through our priorities, which we've discussed here before, so I won't linger on it. I take them through our kind of power tool analogy for AI use, rather than simply a human in the loop, kind of a human overseer of a bunch of robots. So kind of help them to frame the use case for AI in ways that help with safety. And then there's a bunch of things the AI director asks. These are small, and kind of summarize some of the others, but in a more technical way. These are currently conversations that I have with agencies, but they are things that the future AI director will probably turn into like an official document of things that need to be discussed prior to using AI. I'll linger on that for one more moment, and then I think I only have one other piece that I want to provide for background material before we dive into, okay, what do we want to do? So this is from, and I'm sorry that this is looking weird, but this is from Colorado, and I just got this week actually. They're evaluating AI use cases based on risk and organizational impact, kind of low risk on the left, high risk on the right, low impact on the bottom, high impact on the top. And then I've evaluated it like, or framed it into 4 quadrants. So strategic risk, we need some additional, strategic win. We need some additional guardrails and oversight, safe experiments for piloting, and then just like, please don't. And they look at a number of factors. This is still draft, so this may change. But looking at first the risk level, which kind of places it along the bottom axis, and provides up to 40 points of risk. So they talk about whether the audience is inside or outside. External audiences kind of are automatically a 4 or 5. Whether it's brainstorming or final output. If it's something that needs to be highly accurate, this is specific for the Attorney General's office there. So legal filings, things like that. The decision, like whether it's decision making or just a recommendation or even just reference along that matrix. And you can see these others there that they use for their risk assessment. And then they also look at organizational impact. So it's kind of strategic alignment with what their organization is trying to accomplish, efficiency gains, things like that. And that allows them to drop use cases into one of these quadrants. And they're focused right now on the things on the left side of the chart, pilots, and then things that they think could be strategic wins. So that was a speed run through a lot of things. I hope that was helpful framing. I'm interested now in hearing what is the council looking for Vermont, and then we can talk through what that looks like and how much of that is homework assignments for the division and how much of that is stuff the council wants to draft.
Was waiting to see if anybody raised their hand. So my thought in this, we've protected ourselves contractually through, as you pointed out, the PAT process, and then also standard attachments to contracts when certain characteristics of a contract are triggered, right? We've been using essentially the data characteristics to, in the sense of who owns the data, how's the data going to be used. But I think the question maybe is, do we want to consider a separate type of attachment? And I even came up with a fanciful name for it, attachment I, so you'd have AI.
Yeah, good job. I like it.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, that's my Friday. But anyways, an attachment essentially that I liked what Iowa was asking in terms of how are you evaluating? Like let's say there is a case, where we're going to accept that there's going to be AI in use in a contract. I like their notion that goes beyond the data and ask like, how are you doing? How are you evaluating this? How are you confirming that there's no inherent bias and all that? I think that could be, just we could work with our own attorneys and the attorneys general and whomever else, and develop a standard attachment, because AI is, as we see, becoming sort of part of more and more of we're not going out to purchase an AI specifically, but there's a product here that we want to use and it's going to be an AI component to it. So we have to address that in the procurement process. Phil, I'd love to know what you think on that.
So I'm going to go back to my mean little pony one more time. I don't think we actually know what AI is being used on our networks. And until such time as we either put in place something hard, which would be literally, access control lists, items at the router, or in some way guardrails for what products you can get to, which would require you on an ongoing basis to continue to stay, at least understand what products are putting there, are being created. I think there's probably a lot more use of the tools than we recognize within our environments. Now, I can't talk to you, Mark. I don't know what you guys are doing over there, but I do know that in a lot of organizations that I'm talking to, they simply do not know how much AI is being used in their organization. I will say that we do evaluation of procurement for an element of the federal government, and in the last 2 weeks, something on the magnitude of 50% of the proposals that were sent in that were supposed to be technically competent, we could tell that they were all derived from similar generated models. So there's a lot of use of this stuff taking place in the larger scheme. So I just wonder, you don't have to answer that question, Mark. The first starting place is, can we even tell how much of it's being used within our organization before we start? And then because it's a TLS connection or a point-to-point encrypted connection, can we even tell what's being exfiltrated from our organization to be fed into the different generative AI models? We're making the assumption here, and that's probably the right assumption from a procurement standpoint of, if you ask what would we put in, how would we assess the use of that tools? I wonder about the other side of that question is what is being used by those people who aren't asking. Over.
Thank you. Yeah, no. I think that's an excellent point. On our side of the house, that was one of the reasons why we created the in-house director of AI position, because we needed somebody in-house who could answer those questions. I think so in my mind right now, it's framing as a two-part issue. There's one, we'll call it like the prescriptive side of things, like how do we go about procurement process and evaluation and keep ourselves safe there. And the only advantage we really have at this point is that ADS sees all IT contracts and owns all IT contracts, right? That's the only advantage we have there. So, my suggestion was more of like possibly strengthening that. I think what you're bringing up are very good points, and they're probably worth discussing again once we talk in the next agenda item around the AI inventory, because that's probably the first good question to ask of like, well, how do you know this is the inventory, right? How do you know this is complete, right? So not really a rebuttal or an answer, just more of a frame, kind of framing what you were saying into those two models of how are we doing procurement safely, and then the second question is how are we operating? How do we know that we're operating safely? So I don't know. Any other thoughts from anybody else?
I like the bullet point, human responsibility for AI output here. Is that really a feasible thing? Like, what does that mean in the context of what Iowa has written down? Does that mean like somebody's got to be identified as the person who's responsible for everything? And like, how does that actually scale up?
That's how they're framing it, and that's how we framed it here too. Often that is the owner of the process where AI is used. So it's a director level person who owns the work product of all the people who work for them at some level, and also owns the work product of all the robots that those people use, is kind of how we framed it. So if it's like personal productivity use of AI, then like, yes, it's like me using it for personal productivity. If it's we use AI as part of a state system, then it's the process owner, kind of usually a director level person.
As an example, if we're using AI for, say, jobs, reviewing resumes, right? We already have a person today who is
Which we
intaking
don't, to
resumes
be
for,
clear. I say no.
we don't.
We
We
don't.
don't.
We don't do
Thank you.
that.
Yeah, these are all hypotheticals, right? This one's a hypothetical. So, if we were using AI to review resumes that were coming in, the person who's today responsible for that process would still be responsible. And I think as you're describing, Josiah, so it's just, they're now responsible essentially, like ensuring that the AI is not making mistakes on their behalf.
Yeah. And
Michelle, you had your hand up as well. I don't want you to be ignored.
Oh, no problem. Thanks. I just had a thought on operationalizing the advanced approval for AI use. In the bigger projects where we have an RFP, which is most of them, I guess, or bidder's response form, we could have them disclose all AI use in that as part of the procurement itself. And then we would probably lose, I don't know what we do with some of the smaller things. We'd have to figure out a way to work that into a process, but I think if we would at least disclose it would be the first thing.
So at this level, does it feel like we're really at a point of needing to assign some homework, as Josiah was calling it, to like, back to ADS to review that either the RFP process or the actual contracting process?
I'm
'Cause
happy
I
to be
don't,
part of that
yeah,
if you
I
decide
don't want
to.
to see us dragging the
Yeah.
whole ADS procurement process up into this, into this meeting to discuss it. But I think we're
Right.
identifying that uh, there's a couple of additional elements here that that are worth looking at in that process.
so folding in, as you've said, Mark, an attachment I, uh, so that we can have an AI, for anything that is using AI, maybe have a standard prohibition that's just like, don't use AI. That would cover the advanced approval, right? You don't use AI unless you tell us you want to use AI. And if you do want to use AI, then we take out this prohibition and you have this attachment instead, something along those lines, as well as some process work around a BRF or some other similar thing.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. That's kind of what I was thinking. So, um, Michelle, you said Phil, you have something to add, please.
That's okay. You can ask Michelle another question. I'm going a little bit different direction.
Okay. So, Michelle, is this something that you want to, just take as a to do and just throw thoughts together and, come back and we'll put this back on the agenda for the next meeting as well?
Sure. Yeah, I can
Okay,
come up with some thoughts about how we could implement these.
cool. Mr. Sussman.
So I remember as we started to think about cybersecurity and cybersecurity compliance, and when that started to make it into our audit discussions, and specifically in higher education, what we saw was the development from a group construct of something called the Higher Education Community Vendor Assessment Toolkit, or HECVAT. And I can send you a link to it. And it's a tool when you're going to look at acquiring a new product or vendor that's very detailed, that assesses not only the product and its operation, but also the vendor and the vendor, because we see so much stuff that's software as a service. And so I wonder out loud, and I haven't seen any of this yet, but I haven't spent a lot of time researching it. Has anyone seen any, let's say, AI vendor assessment tools um, being developed at all at this point in time? Over.
They're often tangled into, at least the ones I've seen, are tangled into use case evaluation, which is often appropriate. So Center for Public Sector AI, out of, I believe, Oklahoma, um, they've got a pretty robust tool, um, that I can circulate. Uh, there's also been discussion, like with state of Maryland and state of Georgia, as part of their AI procurements, to kind of pre-vet and put together some sort of vendor scorecards in those contexts and then make those available to other states. I think there's a lot of value in doing it with a third party rather than with a particular state, because there's going to be a level of political pressure to get a good score on something like that if it's managed by a state.
Yeah, this is excellent. We actually have a tool that we use for managing vendors, like, or assessing vendors, right? And it has all kinds of facets that it can be added to it. So it starts with the facet of vendor reputation. Then it has facets related to their financials, soundness. It has facets related to their own online security posture and all that. And we have the ability within that to also send them questionnaires, and the responses to those questionnaires come back into the same sort of risk ranking. And they get the 0 to 1,000 score, and ABCD is broken down. So we actually right today have a breakdown of our major vendors, and kind of those that we see as A's and B's and C's. We could send out a questionnaire to them that's specific in this realm, Josiah, to AI activity, and then that could fold into that same risk profile.
It's a great idea.
Huh?
Like it. Let's do it.
Yeah. Yep. All right. Cool. All right. Well, so as a homework assignment, Josiah, maybe I can walk you through the tool.
Sounds good. I have seen the
Is
tool
this
before.
is this something homegrown, Mark?
No, sir.
I'm
No,
not asking you to give me the name of your tool, but is it a homegrown process or something you
No, it's a
purchased?
SaaS service that we pay for an outside vendor,
okay.
and this is all this company does, is these types of audits and assessments of vendors.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
I think it's a bit of an industry standard, so I think there's some opportunity for that work to be recyclable.
Yeah, that was excellent. All right.
Okay, so Michelle and I are going to work on attachment I, and then Mark and I will work on questionnaire to flow through that tool. Any other thoughts on how we do procurement? Especially like Chris and Amanda. Amanda is someone who has to go through this process. If you have any thoughts on it, or Chris, from the AG perspective.
Well, I'd probably defer to Michelle on that one, but yeah, I mean, procurement is sort of outside the scope of our consumer protection interests, but
I would drag in
Thankfully-
Jesse and David.
Yeah.
I said we thankfully don't have too many of these. So I would just make sure that people are aware when it is decided, so people know that this is happening.
Shall we talk about
Inventory.
inventory?
Yep.
Yeah. So I put this in slides, which I don't know, it's hard to see, and just took a couple of columns. So overall, I think we have 35-ish in our latest inventory. And to Phil's point earlier, I am quite confident there are more things than that we have not yet identified. Because we're looking at a combination of stuff that flows through the PAT process that has looked to one of us like, there's AI in there. And so we put it on the inventory and do follow up with the vendor to get the rest of the attributes that legislature requires us to pull. So there's that bucket, which is subject to what has gone through PAT and what still has a contract that's outstanding, and where vendors kind of quietly roll out AI tools that don't require contract amendments. And so we don't see those until after. And then the other bucket that's included in here is stuff that we develop or are involved in the implementation of internally. So you'll see the contract search tool on there, Test IM, test automation, ChatBT. Those are all things that my team is directly involved with the implementation of, or the pilots for these. What makes it onto this list is things that go to production. So there are pilots that we do that either don't materialize or are still in pilot phase that we don't put on the inventory until they actually are real life. So that's what's on here. There are 2 slides of this. I'm interested in where the council wants to take this. I'm happy to talk through specific ones. Or if you've got interest in talking more about how do we improve our posture for detecting the use of AI tools or identifying where AI tools are being used, happy to talk that direction too.
Don't see anybody really having any questions at this point. Okay, let's go to the second one. So the AWS Connect call center, I think that one's probably a catch-all for a number of different tools, right?
Yeah, there's a few specific AWS tools in there whose names I'm going to struggle to grab at any given moment. Q is one of them. The other one is a brand name that I can't remember off the top of my head. Those are services that are folded into the call center and do things like transcriptions and providing kind of next best action to call center agents, surfacing help desk and or help knowledge articles, things like that. Two of the ones that I believe I mentioned in the fall when the renewals came up were Griffi and Insights. Those are tools used by public safety. They have AI components, and the reason that they came up was because they have components that would not be in compliance with state law as well. So that was another piece of our procurement conversation was what responsibility does the AI division have to ensure that these things are being used in compliance with law when investigators over at public safety are doing investigations at public safety. They are aware of the laws they are supposed to comply with. So I think in those cases, we ended up just doing a memo saying, hey, there's this statute that says you can't use facial recognition technology in ways that are, not compliant with state law. The very limited cases where you can use facial recognition technology, but using the technology to be like, hey, find me all the photos of drug paraphernalia on this phone that we've got a warrant to get into. That is an appropriate use of AI. And so that's the kind of thing that these 2 tools enable.
And this was just for reminder for us, like this was submitted. This is something we submit annually to the legislature as well. And it was recently submitted. Was it in January?
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't see from your list here any what I would call general purpose AI tools for the most part. I guess Geo AI tools is general purpose, but
ChatBT, Azure OpenAI, Bing Copilot.
I'm
Those are on
sorry,
the
I
first
didn't see
page.
Bing Copilot. I apologize. Now I
Yep.
see it.
You're
Okay, a little slow.
Yep.
Josiah, a couple less lines on the each of the slides, okay? So that I can only get so close to my screen before my nose touches it, okay?
All right.
Thank you.
So as far as any action with this inventory at the moment, there's really, is there any, I don't know, in terms of like fields that we want to track or anything else? I Are you asking for anything in that realm as well?
We did a report on that, I don't know, a year and a half ago. So if there are 2 years ago, maybe. So if there are changes to that, happy to entertain them. I think those are defined in statute for the most part, so we have limited autonomy there. There are some that just haven't ended up making that much sense to collect, like total cost of ownership and things like that, because we're not procuring, with the exception of the ones that are AI specific tools, we're not procuring them for their AI capabilities. We're procuring them for other things, and they happen to also include an AI component. So those, for example, are being tracked just under their project costs. I think the directions that I think this conversation could go that would help us is if there are things that we can be doing to do a better job of identifying AI tools in use, that would be great. Or if there are like specific things in the inventory that we'd like to dive into in more detail to see how they could be used, I guess how we could guide our procurements based on the use cases we already have. That would be another spot potentially.
Can I ask another question?
Yes.
For your general purpose AI, do you have any guardrails in place looking at prompts or information that may be exfiltrated in some way from the state defined areas?
We have a couple of things in that space. So we have policy guidance that is, if you're using a general purpose AI tool, you can't put anything that's not public release information into it. So we've made that policy constraint. I don't believe we currently have technical constraints. It's something we have talked about a little bit. And then for our Azure OpenAI and ChatGPT, those are not general. Those are not public things, so they aren't subject to that
They've
same
been
constraint.
trained on Vermont data and it stays in your network.
Exactly. And so
Okay.
those tools, the way that we handle them is you can't put anything in that would subject them to an audit. So no CGIS, no MARZ, like nothing like that. But it can be internal data. It just can't be like auditable data, which opens up a number of additional use cases.
Is there anything here, Josiah, when we look at this is a great inventory. Do you look at these from a perspective of anything related to holistic a risk basis across these elements? Is that something of value for us to discuss? I'm having trouble, but this is a very generic piece here. And I don't know I don't want to overstep, what are the defined borders of what the council is, but is there some way in which we can assist or support or help you looking at those risk related activities of this technology? I'm having a little bit of trouble grabbing it, but there's something here that I wonder that might be of value for us to have a conversation about.
So, wishful thought there, like if we go back to the Colorado risk model, if we applied that to some of our existing tools, right?
Yeah.
Okay, is that what we're thinking?
I think that's probably what I'm working in my head here is are there things that we would be concerned with? Have we thought through within Chat Vermont, say, is there an opportunity to poison that data set and affect the outcomes or the value of it? I'm probably just reaching too far based on the place where I live, but I think maybe applying some risk framework on these tools, which would then lead us to some, I got a frog in my pocket, but lead us to some discussion about what the guardrails or the controls might be to guarantee, or at least to put in some assurance that the outcomes of these specific products don't end up with those elements or pieces that we don't want them to, especially as they move closer and closer to supporting decisions.
I think generally, before we implement a tool or before it makes it into the inventory, we're applying risk mitigations as we've suggested in our previous guidance around data use and management. There were a number in there. The initial report on the inventory and avoiding risk of bias, there were a set of mitigations we recommended in there. And even the code of ethics had a few. So we're doing a lot of those things before they make it into the inventory. I think where I highlighted the two that seemed the riskiest to me from a compliance perspective. That's not necessarily the same as the riskiest from an impact perspective. And looking at what kinds of risk we should be evaluating. For example, the cybersecurity risk that you raised about the poisoning of the model. For some models, that is a risk. For other ones, it really isn't because of the way they're implemented. And that's something that I don't believe we're currently looking at. So that might be an area if there are, a handful of categories that we should be looking at, either from the NIST risk management framework. I believe there were like a dozen categories there, or if there are other kind of frameworks that we should look at to evaluate the existing tools. So that could be helpful.
So let me ask one more question. I'm not trying to make anybody's life more difficult, but when you do a patch or a patch update, are you going back to the risk process you did for creation, or are you doing a patch update just and looking at it for maybe implementation risk?
Generally just implementation risk. I don't know, Mark, if you want to chime in there, but I think that's our usual approach.
Well, there's patching and then there's upgrades. So I think,
yeah,
right. So in the frame of patching, yes, what you just said. In the frame of upgrades, we're certainly much more focused on what does this change in terms of what we evaluated before, what new features are introduced, what new attributes need to be reviewed, all of that.
Okay. That makes that very good. Thanks for that differentiation, Mark. Just,
Yep.
We've been down this road for conservatively 30 years. And there's best practice associated with this. The only piece at this moment in time that I have great concern about is I don't think we actually know what the hell is pardon my language, what is operating on our networks. I don't think we really quite have that and yet. I think that will probably be something that will be built into our tool sets at some point in time, 12, 18, 24 months from now. We'll have the ability to parse out those guardrails and put in place then the necessary constructs so that we can get at some of these things that we're doing from an assessment or a sandbox basis to begin with. But I don't see it in the tool sets yet. It's coming. There'll be proxy servers that'll break the TLS and the encryption and evaluate everything that goes to and from the generative AI, and you'll be able to put in place an assessment at that point in time. It just doesn't exist at this moment in time for the most part.
Yeah, I totally agree with what you're saying. I think we have tools that they look for the heuristics of behaviors on the network that tell us of potential maliciousness or risk or whatever. But I think that those heuristics are traditionally based upon human actions or coded actions or things like that. They need to get better at the volume of things that can happen through bots and the processing speed that can happen. I know. So, and we are looking at tools that can tell us more, give us more clarity in terms of what's happening laterally on our network. Sorry, all my devices around me are going off at the same time. My apologies. You didn't hear it, but they annoyed me. So I think I finished my thought though.
Yep. Thank you.
I would add, there is an opportunity, and I don't know what all the union constraints on this might be, the collective bargaining agreement flavored constraints, but as far as generative AI tools, there are one or two main API models that could probably be pretty readily segmented out of network traffic. That requests that are this shape are going to a generative AI model because they have a very specific structure that they use. So that might help to identify data exfiltration risks. I don't know, Mark, if you've got thoughts on how we could actually implement that, but that may be a path we could look at as well.
Yeah. Separate from the council, I would love to have a Nuari conversation between the CTO and Nuari and just kind of talk about some of those tools specifically.
Yes, yeah, I'd love to do that at your leisure, Mark.
Yeah. Okay. So we want to try, looks like we got a few minutes left. We do need public comment. And so we're going to open it up. And just as a polite reminder to everyone, it's 2-minute time limit. And please try to, as best you can, keep it germane to the topics we are discussing. So at this moment, I'll allow anyone who's participating to raise their hand, speak. You'll be recognized. Sorry, and then you can speak. We should do this over a Facebook live stream sometime so we could see like comments coming in from all over the world in that 2-minute period. All right. Well, I don't see any hands come up. As we start shutting things down, please, if you have something, let me know. But take another quick pause here, and then after which I'll ask for motions to adjourn. Oh, we have a typer in the chat.
Can I, we close the public comment. Can I ask a non-germane question of Josiah at this moment, or should I put it in an email?
But would you want us
Let's
to
adjourn first,
Yeah, I was going
and
to
then
say,
you can ask a
let's
non-germane
adjourn, and
question.
then
Okay,
you can.
thank you.
We could be
Thank
as
you.
non-germane as we need to be. So,
Okay, thank you.
all right. So with that, let's try to conclude here and take a motion to adjourn today's meeting.
To adjourn.
Second.
And seconded by Mr. Sussman, and all in favor of adjourning and carrying forth with your Fridays. Aye. Okay. Well, thank you all for the great conversation and inputs today. And the recording has stopped or will soon stop. So